The lawn was perfect. That was the first thing Dana Mercer noticed when they pulled into Crestwood Circle for the first time. Not the houses, though the houses were beautiful. All of them. Identical in the way that suggested not laziness, but coordination. Not the trees lining the cul-de-sac, though those were perfect too, trimmed to the same height, spaced at intervals, too even to be natural. The lawn. Every yard on Crestwood Circle had grass so uniformly green, so precisely edged, so completely free of the dandelions and crabgrass and bare patches that marked every other lawn Dana had ever owned, that it looked less like something grown and more like something manufactured, installed, rolled out in the night, and stapled down before anyone could ask questions. She mentioned it to her husband Greg as they sat in the driveway of their new house. 14 Crestwood Circle for bedrooms, 2.5 baths, a price that had seemed too good and turned out, as prices that seem too good always do, to have reasons. Greg said it was an HOA thing. Said some neighborhoods just took that stuff seriously. Said she was overthinking it. Dana let it go. She was good at letting things go. She'd had to be, the last few years. The move, the job change, the attempt to rebuild something that had quietly come apart at the seams while they weren't paying attention. Crestwood Circle was supposed to be the fresh start. The exhale. The place where the Mercers finally stopped running from one version of their life and started building the next one. She was not going to ruin it by worrying about the grass. But here is what Dana didn't know. Standing in that driveway on a bright Tuesday afternoon in April while her kids carried boxes through the front door and the neighbors watched from behind curtains they thought were opaque. The grass wasn't an HOA thing. The grass was a symptom. And the house at 14 Crestwood Circle had been waiting, in the particular way that patient, hungry things wait, for exactly the right family to move in. Crestwood Circle had 11 houses. Dana counted them on the first morning, standing at the kitchen window with a coffee she hadn't tasted yet, doing the thing she always did in new places, cataloging, taking inventory, trying to understand the geometry of where she'd landed. 11 houses arranged in a perfect circle around a central island of landscaping, a manicured oval of flowering shrubs, and a single large oak tree that somehow had no dead branches, no missing bark, no evidence of the ordinary where that trees accumulate over decades. It looked, she thought, like a tree in a painting, present but unconvincing. The houses were all the same model, colonial style, white or cream siding, dark shutters, 2-car garages, the same front porch configuration on every one. Built in the early 1990s by a developer whose company had dissolved shortly after completing the project. The dissolution was not unusual. Small developers folded all the time. What was slightly unusual, Dana would discover later, was that every single home in Crestwood Circle had been purchased within 90 days of the development's completion and had changed hands, in the 30-plus years since, exactly once each. Every house. One family in. One family out. Then whoever was there now. She found this in the county property records 3 weeks after moving in, on a night when she couldn't sleep and Greg was breathing steadily beside her and the house was making sounds she was trying to convince herself were normal settling sounds and not something else entirely. But that came later. In the first days, what she noticed was the quiet. Not the quiet of a peaceful neighborhood. She'd lived in those, knew what that felt like, the ambient hum of ordinary life conducted at a civilized volume. This was different. This was the quiet of people who had agreed, collectively and without stating it, to produce as little evidence of their own existence as possible. No music from open windows. No kids playing in driveways. No lawnmowers, and the lawns were perfect. No dogs barking. No cars starting at odd hours. No voices carrying across the cul-de-sac on warm evenings. Just silence. Manicured, coordinated, deliberate silence. The neighbors introduced themselves on the second day. This was the part that Dana would return to again and again in the weeks that followed. Turning it over in her mind like a stone, she kept expecting to find something under. They came in sequence. Not together, one household at a time, spaced roughly 2 hours apart, as if following a schedule. The Pattisons from number 9 first, then the Holloways from number 3, then a retired couple named Fitch from number 7, then the Garcias from number 12. Each visit lasted between 15 and 20 minutes. Each one involved a baked good Dana hadn't asked for and a conversation that followed. She realized afterward, an almost identical structure. Welcome to the neighborhood. Lovely to have a young family. If you need anything, don't hesitate. We look after each other here. That phrase. Every single household used it. We look after each other here. Not we're a close community or it's a friendly street or any of the dozen natural variations a person might use to say the same thing. The exact same phrase. The exact same cadence. Delivered with the exact same warm, slightly too steady smile. Greg said it was just a neighborhood thing. Said people probably picked it up from each other over the years. Said she was reading into it. Dana smiled and agreed and started paying closer attention. It was the casserole dishes that broke the pattern first. Every neighbor who visited brought food in a ceramic casserole dish. Not disposable containers. Not the foil trays or plastic boxes that people use when they don't expect to see you again. Ceramic. The kind you expect back. The kind that requires a return visit. Dana stacked them in the kitchen and waited. Nobody came back for them. After 2 weeks, she mentioned it to Sandra Patterson. Number 9. The first to visit. The one Dana had found slightly the most approachable, and Sandra's response was a half-second too slow. A pause so brief that if Dana hadn't been watching for exactly this kind of thing, she would have missed it entirely. Then Sandra smiled and said, "Oh, don't worry about those, whenever you get around to it," and changed the subject with a smoothness that felt rehearsed. Dana washed the dishes and lined them up on the kitchen counter. She did not return them. She wanted to see who would come. Nobody came. She started watching the neighbors more carefully after that. Not obviously, she was subtle about it, in the way people are subtle when they've decided something is wrong but can't yet say what it is. She noticed things. She noticed that the Holloways from number 3 went for a walk every evening at exactly 8:15 p.m. Not approximately. Exactly. She timed it for 5 consecutive nights. 8:15 out, 8:47 back. Same route. Same pace. Never varying. The kind of precision that reads as healthy habit until you watch it closely enough to see that it isn't comfort or routine driving it, it's something closer to compulsion. She noticed that the Fitch couple from number 7 never had their lights on past 9 p.m. Not a single window lit after 9. Every night. As if the house went to sleep on a schedule and the people inside it had no choice but to follow. She noticed that none of the neighbors on Crestwood Circle had visitors. In 6 weeks of watching, Dana did not see a single car she hadn't already cataloged pull into the cul-de-sac. No family coming for dinner. No friends stopping by. No delivery trucks except the one stopping at number 14, her house. The circle was sealed. Whatever life was being lived inside it was entirely self-contained. But the thing that stayed with her, the thing that she came back to every time she tried to talk herself out of what she was feeling, was the way the neighbors looked at her house. Not at her. Not at Greg or the kids. At the house itself. When a neighbor passed on the street, their gaze would drift, just for a moment, just a flicker, to the facade of 14 Crestwood Circle. Not curious. Not admiring. Something that sat uncomfortably between reverence and relief. As if the house were an authority they were checking in with. As if they were reporting. She told Greg. He said she needed sleep. He wasn't wrong. She wasn't sleeping well. But sleep deprivation didn't explain what she'd seen. It only explained why she couldn't stop seeing it. The architectural irregularities began presenting themselves in the 3rd week. She found the first one in the basement. She had gone down to check the water heater, a routine inspection, nothing unusual, and had noticed, in the far corner behind the utility shelving, that the concrete floor had a different texture. Not cracked, not stained, just subtly different. Smoother. As if it had been poured separately from the rest, at a different time, by different hands, for a different purpose. She moved the shelving unit. Behind it was a drain. A large one. Much larger than a utility drain needed to be, set into a perfectly circular depression in the floor approximately 3 feet across. The drain cover was a heavy iron disc with no manufacturer's markings. She tried to lift it. It didn't move. Not locked. Just resistant in the way that something is resistant when it's under pressure from below. She replaced the shelving unit and went back upstairs and didn't mention it to Greg. The second irregularity was in the walls. Dana had been planning to repaint the living room. The existing color was a shade of off-white that she'd initially found neutral and had gradually come to find oppressive, and had been testing paint swatches against the wall when she pressed her palm flat to the surface and felt it. Warmth. Not the ambient warmth of a sun-facing exterior wall on a mild afternoon. Something more localized, more internal. A warmth that seemed to emanate from within the wall itself, from somewhere behind the drywall and insulation, as if something on the other side was generating heat. She pressed her ear to the wall.
She heard it for the first time then. Faint.
Rhythmic. Not pipes. She knew the sound of pipes, had lived with old plumbing long enough to know its vocabulary. This was different.
Slower.
More organic. It was closest, she thought, to the sound of breathing. She told herself it was the HVAC system. Told herself the ductwork ran through that wall, and the forced air had a particular resonance in this house, in this room, at this time of day. She painted over the swatch she'd been testing and chose a different wall to test the next one on, and spent the evening watching television with Greg at a volume slightly higher than they usually kept it. But she kept her hand on the armrest of the couch rather than the cushion, because the couch was against that wall, and she could feel it through the frame. Sandra Patterson told her the truth on a Thursday evening in the 5th week.
She didn't mean to.
Dana was almost certain of that. It wasn't confession, it was fracture. Something in Sandra had been holding for a long time, and in the particular context of that evening, Dana had brought wine. They'd been talking longer than usual. The night had gotten darker around them without either of them noticing. Something gave way. It started with a question Dana had been building toward for weeks. How long have you lived here, Sandra? 11 years. And before you, who had this house? A long pause. Sandra looking at her wine glass. Then, the Delanos. They were here for about 2 years. What happened to them? Another pause. Longer. They moved, Sandra said. People move. Dana waited. Sandra set down her wine glass and looked at Dana with an expression that was trying very hard to be neutral and was not succeeding. The house chooses, she said quietly. That's the only way I know how to say it. It chooses who comes in, and it decides over time whether they're what it needs. The Delanos weren't. Neither were the people before them. The Hendersons lasted 8 years, which is the longest anyone has managed in that house since the Crestwood family built it in 1991. Dana asked what happened to families the house decided weren't what it needed. Sandra was quiet for a long time. They leave, she said finally. Usually at night. Usually quickly. Usually they don't take everything. Dana asked about the drain in the basement. Sandra went completely still. You found it, she said. Not a question. What is it? Sandra picked up her wine glass. Took a long sip. Set it down again. The house needs to feed, she said. Not often, but regularly. The neighborhood, we all agreed a long time ago that it was better to keep it fed than to find out what it did when it wasn't. The lawn care, the quiet, the way we keep to ourselves. It's all maintenance. It's all part of keeping it stable. Dana asked what it fed on. Sandra looked at her steadily. What do you think it's been doing for 5 weeks? Dana left that night. She went home, walked through the front door, and stood in the hallway and understood, in the way you understand things when your body gets there before your brain, that the house felt different than it had in the first days. Warmer, fuller, more present. The walls weren't just warm now. They were warm everywhere. She pressed her hand to the hallway wall and felt the slow, steady pulse of something that had no business being inside drywall and insulation and timber framing. She pressed her hand to the staircase banister and felt it there too. She went to the kids' rooms, both sleeping. She stood in each doorway for a long time and watched them breathe and made a calculation. Then she went to the bedroom and woke Greg. She didn't tell him everything. She told him enough. She told him about the drain, about the warmth, about what Sandra had said. She told him in the flat, quiet tone of someone who has moved past fear into something more functional, the operational calm of a person who has identified a problem and is now focused entirely on solving it. Greg believed her. This surprised her slightly. She'd expected resistance, the gentle skepticism he'd been offering for 5 weeks. Instead, he sat up in bed and listened. And when she finished, he said, I've been hearing it too. At night. I didn't want to say anything. They packed what they could in 2 hours. Not everything. Sandra had said people usually didn't take everything, and Dana understood now why. Because the house was not passive about being left. Because somewhere between the first week and the fifth, the warmth in the walls had spread to the floors and the ceilings and the bones of the building itself, and what had been a slow ambient presence had become something more alert, more aware. The front door was harder to open than it should have been. Dana put her shoulder into it and it opened. Not locked, not stuck, just reluctant. And the night air outside was cold in a way that felt like relief, and the kids stumbled out half asleep and Greg got them into the car, and Dana stood on the front porch for one moment and looked back at the house.
Every light was on.
She hadn't turned them on. They had come on by themselves. Every room, every floor, the house lit from within like a lantern. From the outside, standing on the porch, looking in through the front windows, she could see the walls, pulsing.
Slowly.
Rhythmically. Patient. She got in the car. Greg drove. Neither of them spoke for 20 minutes. Then Dana said, "The casserole dishes. They weren't a welcome gift. They were a feeding schedule." Greg kept his eyes on the road. "I know," he said. They never went back. The house at 14 Crestwood Circle was listed for sale 6 weeks later. Same photos. Same price. A number that stopped people mid-scroll and made them read the listing twice. The neighbors are still there. Still walking at 8:15. Still dark by 9 p.m. Still maintaining the lawns with a precision that looks less like habit and more like obligation. There is a new family in number 14 now. They moved in on a Tuesday. The neighbors brought casserole dishes, one household at a time, spaced 2 hours apart, following the schedule. The father said the lawn was incredibly well kept. The mother said she was sure they'd love it here. The house settled around them on the first night.
Warm.
Patient. Waiting to see if they were what it needed.